Ever wonder how a rebellious mix of country, blues, and jazz gave birth to the biggest musical revolution in history? Or how we went from Elvis shaking things up in the 50s to Hendrix lighting his guitar on fire in the 60s? Well, you're in for a wild ride. If you're a music lover curious about the origins of the sound that defined generations, or tired of the same old playlists and crave some musical history, this video is for you. By the end of this journey, you'll not only understand the evolution of rock and roll but also discover the stories behind the legends who made it all happen. Imagine it's the early 1950s in the United States. Post-war America was booming, suburbs were expanding, and the popular music of the time, well, it was pretty tame. Then, something happened. A new sound started bubbling up from the underground. It was raw, wild, and dangerous, and it had a name, rock and roll. But rock and roll didn't just come out of nowhere. Its roots are deep, planted firmly in the African American communities of the South, where blues, gospel, and rhythm and blues formed a musical stew that was just waiting to explode. Then, along came a young truck driver from Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis Presley. With a blend of country twang and bluesy soul, Elvis didn't just perform music, he embodied it. His moves, scandalous. His voice, unforgettable. Parents hated it. The establishment hated it. But teenagers, they couldn't get enough. Elvis wasn't just a performer, he was rebellion personified. But Elvis wasn't the only one shaking things up. Around the same time, other artists like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Buddy Holly were pushing the boundaries of rock and roll even further. Chuck Berry was the architect of rock guitar. He took country twang, added a backbeat, and bam, we had guitar-driven rock and roll. His stage presence was legendary, with that famous duck walk still being imitated today. And Little Richard, he could blow the roof off any room with his voice. His high-energy performances and flamboyant personality brought a wild, infectious energy to the stage. Then there was Buddy Holly, with his glasses and his guitar, giving us the blueprint for the modern rock band: 2 guitars, a bass, and drums. He was one of the first rockers to write and produce his own songs, paving the way for generations of musicians to follow. Each of these artists wasn't just making music, they were tearing down walls, breaking racial and social barriers, and giving the world a sound that was fresh, rebellious, and full of energy. Rock and roll had arrived, and it wasn't going anywhere. Fast forward to the early 1960s. Rock and roll was still going strong in the States, but it was about to go global. Across the pond in England, bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were taking rock and roll, adding their own spin, and sending it right back across the Atlantic. This was the British invasion. The Beatles were the biggest band the world had ever seen. Their early hits, like I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You, were pure, joyful rock and roll. But as they grew as artists, so did their sound. Albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver pushed the boundaries of what rock could be, melding folk, classical music, and even Eastern influences. The Rolling Stones, on the other hand, weren't interested in being clean-cut pop stars. They wanted to bring the dirt, the grit, and the attitude of American blues to the mainstream. Mick Jagger's swagger and Keith Richards' raw guitar riffs were a recipe for rock rebellion. By the mid-60s, the British invasion had completely reshaped rock and roll. These bands weren't just playing music, they were redefining it, not afraid to experiment, take risks, and push the limits of what rock could be. And then, there was Jimi Hendrix. Before Hendrix, the electric guitar was just another instrument. But in his hands, it became a gateway to a whole new universe of sound. Hendrix didn't just play notes, he painted with them. Every strum, every bend of the string carried an emotional weight that left audiences speechless. Hendrix didn't just transform the sound of rock, he challenged what music could mean. He pushed the boundaries of both technical skill and emotional depth, taking listeners on a journey unlike anything they'd experienced before. Who could forget his legendary performance of The Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock? With his guitar wailing, echoing the sounds of bombs and sirens, Hendrix turned the national anthem into a reflection of the turbulent times, war, civil rights struggles, and a generation fighting for change. Hendrix wasn't just a guitarist, he was a visionary. By the late 60s, rock and roll had become the heartbeat of the counterculture movement. It wasn't just about making music, it was about making statements. The songs of the time weren't just entertainment, they were anthems of protest, freedom, and rebellion. Rock became a tool for social change, with bands like the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, and Pink Floyd leading the charge into the psychedelic era. Albums like The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd weren't just records, they were experiences. And then came the rock festivals. Monterey Pop in 1967 and Woodstock in 1969 were more than just concerts, they were defining moments of a generation. Monterey Pop introduced America to artists like Hendrix and Janis Joplin, while Woodstock became the ultimate symbol of peace, love, and rock and roll. Hendrix's performance of the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock remains one of the most iconic moments in rock history, a moment when music, politics, and culture collided in a way that still resonates today. As the 70s rolled in, rock and roll was splitting into different branches. The psychedelic experimentation of the 60s paved the way for the birth of hard rock and heavy metal. Bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath took the bluesy roots of rock and turned up the volume, literally. Led Zeppelin's epic tracks like Stairway to Heaven took rock into mystical, larger-than-life territory, while Black Sabbath introduced a darker, heavier sound that laid the foundation for heavy metal. But while hard rock was getting louder, punk rock was brewing underground. Bands like the Ramones and the Sex Pistols stripped rock down to its raw essentials, fast, loud, and full of attitude. Punk was a return to the spirit of early rock, in roll, rebellious, unpolished, and unapologetic. The Ramones' short, fast songs and the Sex Pistols' anarchic energy reminded the world that rock and roll was never meant to be perfect, it was meant to be real. From Elvis shaking up the 50s to Hendrix breaking every rule in the book, rock and roll has always been about one thing: freedom. It's a genre that has evolved, adapted, and transformed over the decades, but its core has remained the same. It's about breaking the rules, challenging the status quo, and using music to express what words alone can't. So whether you're cranking up Led Zeppelin, moshing to the Ramones, or diving into the psychedelic world of Hendrix, remember, you're part of a legacy that stretches back decades. Rock and roll is more than just music. It's a revolution. And as long as there are musicians who dare to push the limits, it's never going away. Now it's your turn. Who's your rock and roll icon? Are you more of a Hendrix shredder, or do you have the punk spirit of the Ramones? Drop a comment below and let's talk rock. If this video rocked your world, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your fellow rock lovers. Stay tuned, because we've got more stories, more legends, and more history coming your way. And remember, no matter how much time passes, rock and roll will always keep us connected. Keep rocking, and I'll see you in the next one.